This episode of the Party Loaded podcast is proudly sponsored by Audible.com. Check out their awesome catalogue of audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from. And be sure to grab a free audiobook on us and support the show by visiting audibletrial.com/endgame.
Let's party.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Party Loaded podcast for Wednesday evening. It happens to be the 18th of July. This is episode 136, and this, of course, is your weekly hit of everything great in the world of video games. I'm one of your hosts, Luke Ritalik. Tonight, I'm partying up with Mr. Christian Paulson Brown. Welcome back.
Hello, always glad to be here.
Like there was ever a doubt. That's it. But In Doubt is Jam tonight. She did not make it, unfortunately, but we've found a fantastic ring-in. And I shouldn't say ring-in because we did plan this a little while in advance. We have gracing us with his very distant presence tonight, Mr. Jason Imms. Welcome, Jason. How's it going?
Hello, friends. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it. So I should sort of specify, when I say distant, in the grand scheme of things, we're still talking Australia here. So
That's true.
You're not dialing in from the US or the UK or somewhere distant in Greenland or God knows where else.
No, I'm just about as far away as you can get while staying within the country, being in Hobart.
Yes, absolutely. So how's things in Hobart this week? What's it looking like down there?
It's real windy, is the problem. Like, I actually lost half a day of work a couple of days ago because we had a sudden forecast for 40 to 60 kilometre an hour winds with 100k an hour gusts.
Wow.
And that's a thing that happens. But it was only a few weeks ago that we had similar winds, and I was away in Melbourne at the time, and a tree was blown over on our property and smashed into our house. So I'm a little bit gun shy about these high winds, and also just finished building a trampoline for my kids. So I spent half a day running around buying sandbags to prop up my trampoline and stop it from destroying anything because it's a big boy.
Yeah, you don't want to have a recreation of like the movie Up or something in trampoline form. That would be a bit of a disaster. Yeah.
No, thank you. And my insurance has taken enough of a hit as it is.
Yep, absolutely. There's not going to be any windfall to offset that.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. I now know what I'm in for. Excellent.
Oh, you got no idea when it comes to Luke.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, I'm primed and ready. It's been a good week. So we got tons of fun stuff to talk about tonight, of course. Jason's on to chat to us about everything, the Machine QA, which is basically your new passion and current sort of activity in the gaming world, as well as sort of outside of that, from what I understand. But we'll get into that a little bit later. We've got some games to chat about, a little bit of Octopath Traveller, which we're just going to touch on. And there's been some interesting news picking up again in the industry this week. So I think we're past that post-E3 lull and things are actually moving along at a decent clip again. So, but yeah, Jason, I guess we should probably start with you, given that we've asked you to come on tonight to spend a bit of time talking about yourself, which is something you don't often get to do because you're usually the one doing the interviewing of the people in the other end of the microphone. So
that's true.
Yeah, you can take a break from that tonight, and you're in the hot seat for a change once again. Not that you haven't ever been before, but it's been a little while. So let's kick off with a bit of a abridged Jason Imms story. So tell everybody who listens to Party Loaded, who the heck are you, and what is your background in all things gaming?
Sure. I've had a weird pathway and a weird career. So I guess the main entry to the games industry was I've spent about 7 years as a games journalist, as a freelancer working for a whole bunch of publications in Australia and the US. Most notably, I guess, I worked for GameSpot for quite a while. I've one of the guest columnists at Giant Bomb. I was the Australian correspondent to Killscreen, and here in Australia I've been working with Hyper Magazine and PC Powerplay and PC Tech Authority and a few others, quite a few others. That was my entry to the games industry as more than a consumer, and just a year ago decided to start a quality assurance company, which sounds like a pretty hard left turn. But I actually worked in QA, in software QA for many years, about a decade before moving into games journalism. And so this is a quite a kind of a chance for me to bring together two passions of mine, building good software and the fantastic network that I've been able to build in the games industry in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be noted as well, similar to what we mentioned in the opening of the episode, that, building that up has been perhaps a little bit more challenging for yourself, sort of being located down in Tasmania, where, things do not come quite as easily as those denizens that we network with that are located in your Melbournes and your Sydneys and, where a lot of the more sort of frequent industry action is happening. So
we feel that here in Perth too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can definitely relate. Probably not quite on the same scale because things have definitely picked up in recent years in Perth, despite the lack of support that is provided from local government here. But a lot of the similar sort of themes exist with regards to remoteness and fighting tooth and nail for that kind of support and recognition. And you can certainly hear those war stories from a lot of the devs over this end. So yeah, what's it like down in Tasmania these days? I do remember you sort of speaking about it briefly when you had your very, very first appearance on the Game Hugs podcast. But I'm just wondering, sort of, what's it like since then? Have things changed much? Has it moved along? What do you think?
We've grown quite a bit. We're approaching, I run the Tasmanian Game Development Society along with quite a few other people. It's not a one-man show by any stretch. We're up to about nearly 500 people in the crew now, which is pretty exciting. That's statewide. As far as actual industry growth is concerned, we really only have a handful of studios that are anywhere near ready to release to market, which is just a product of us being relatively young. Our industry, our community here in Tasmania is still early. It's still full of a lot of students and people who are up and coming and trying things for the first time and attending their first GCAPs and all that kind of stuff. So we've still got a ways to go, but we're definitely making strides, and it's really exciting to see a couple of younger studios really committing to the idea and taking days off work and cutting their day jobs down to 4 days a week so that they can have one extra day a week to work on their game and build that stuff in a sustainable way, but really committing to it. It's a really exciting place to be right now. So to be our big, hairy, audacious goal is we want to see Tasmania become a place that's really exciting for people to work. And we'd love it if we were able to tempt a studio from somewhere else in the country or overseas to come to Tasmania and move here. That would be a big win for us. It's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year. But that's a goal we'd like to see happen at some stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you find that you're ever having to fight a bit of a brain drain? Do people from Tasmania often go to the mainland to get into the industry, and you have trouble keeping them there?
Yeah, it's a super common phrase that we hear all the time in games and also just in the IT industry in general. It is a challenge. In the last few years, things have changed a little bit. There's been much more of a focus on tourism in Tasmania, which has brought a lot of people here recreationally, and that's also been affecting people's general perception of Tasmania. So brain drain is still a problem, but what's nice is that we have pretty great connectivity down here now. We have the NBN pretty widely available, and we really are only a couple $100 flight to Melbourne. It's a 45-minute flight. Realistically, it's not that hard to get to where you need to be. Like if I need to take a meeting with a client and it's awkward for me to do it over the phone, then I can just jump on a plane and I can be there pretty soon. It's not that much of a challenge. So that stuff is shifting, but it's going to be an ongoing problem long term until we have enough job opportunities in Tasmania to kind of keep people here, or we have people and business owners seeing the idea of having remote workers as something that isn't poison, but actually something quite positive, which is something I guess the machine is kind of tied up in that for me. I've built that company as a very specifically remote thing because I don't live here. I love it here. My family lives here. This is where I want to be, and uprooting my kids for work doesn't really feel right. So yeah, we want to stay, and we're going to hopefully help our friends do the same.
Yeah, well, working remotely would be something that after this many years you'd be pretty deft-hand at, I would imagine. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge for sure. And, in my early days as a journo, it was pretty disheartening to see how many opportunities went to people in Sydney especially, but also in Melbourne, purely because they were located there or, in a large part. And, it's hard to kind of keep the green envy monster at bay sometimes when you're seeing that kind of thing going on. But I just had to kind of change my attitude a little bit, I think, and just make some decisions about what kind of coverage I could do without being in those places.
Yeah.
And that was great because it led me to doing coverage I really care about instead of doing the same old stuff. I'm not just going to the press events and writing them up. I'm not just responding to interview requests that come through press releases. I'm focusing a lot more on people. And as far as I'm concerned, people are the most exciting part of any story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in this day and age of digital media and, rampant consumerism, treating the written word as perhaps not as, I guess, robust as it once was, and, a lot of clickbaity content online that's designed to get views as opposed to actually carry a genuine message, that curating your own feed of work coming through would be something that I imagine is quite a good motivator. So,
yeah, absolutely. We all live under capitalism. And that's the reality we live in, and it sucks, but that's it. We all have money we need to earn, and the businesses we work for have to earn, and sometimes the way they have to do that is less than ideal, and it does make it hard to do really good work sometimes. But that's the frustrating reality.
Yeah. So your game is writing, from what I understand, I'm going by memory here, but you got your first sort of big break as far as picking up work as a games writer or a games journalist in the old Whiskey Media days. And it was Austin Walker that sort of gave you a shot, was it? Have I got that right?
No, Austin wasn't around at that point. I originally started outside games altogether.
Okay, much further than that.
I worked for tested.com.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'd been a long-time fan of all things Whiskey Media, including Tested, primarily Giant Bomb. That was where my main passion was, but also way into tech. And I noticed that Will and Norm were incredibly overworked, and through subtle things they were saying in podcasts and on the forums, noting that it seemed as though they could probably do with some help. So I just reached out to them. I just got in touch by email and said, I have no experience. I have a blog though. Maybe I could give you a hand. Would you be interested in bringing me on as a freelancer? And they, at that time, happened to be looking and gave me a shot. And in the end, taught me everything. I had no experience or training or qualifications in the area, but they brought me on and taught me everything. I owe an entire career to those guys. And very gratifyingly had a chance to meet up with Will during GDC in 2016 for the first time in person, and thank him personally for the fact that, I wouldn't have been at GDC if it weren't for Will and Norm giving me a shot back then.
That's awesome.
So it was a wonderful thing, and over time I was able to leverage that brand and the work that I did over there to get jobs at other publications, and eventually over about a year and a half, 2 years, eventually make it over to games.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I must admit, my first encounter with any sort of writing that you'd done, and I think this is actually pre-GameHub days as well, was the bit that you wrote on the Train Jam. So the developers Train Jam, yeah. So remember reading that fondly around the time that sort of Game Jam for us locally was getting on the radar, and the concept of that kind of think tank for developers was becoming a thing. So and that really struck me as something that was very different and wasn't your standard sort of bit of reading fare. So it was a good piece that stood out to me. So. Yeah.
Do you happen to remember which publication that was for? Because that was the most interesting part of that whole thing for me, aside from Train Jam itself, which was just wonderful, was I had to write 5 different articles for 5 different publications on that event.
Oh, really? Well, it would have, given what I would have been looking at that time, I'm pretty sure it was a Giant Bomb article, but...
Sure. Yeah. So that one would have been the constraint article. So I wrote for Giant Bomb, Killscreen, PC Power Play, Hyper Magazine, and CNET, all about the same, that one 3-day event.
Wow.
And so that was a real challenge, because I landed all those. I pitched it to 5 different places and landed all 5 of them, which had never happened to me before. And so now I thought, well, I guess I have to write these, and I had to come up with 5 different angles. I had to write under 5 different voices. It was a real challenge, and it was really fun to do, and it was quite gratifying to kind of test myself and get it over the line. A couple of those pieces weren't as good as I would have liked. They weren't up to my usual quality standards, but thankfully very good editorial teams had my back on those ones.
Yeah. Sounds like a great way of demonstrating your sort of versatility.
Look, there was definitely concerns about, is this appropriate? But I was very open with all of those editors and showed them my work, and they could see the different angles there, and they all were all okay about it in the end. They were happy. There was a little bit of a concern when the CNET article went up while I was still on the train, I had a message from another editor going, "Hey, I thought you were writing for us," and so we had to, it was very important to me that I was really open about that stuff. I wasn't trying to hide anything. So I showed them all my notes, and they could see it, and they were ultimately cool with it.
I guess, fortunately, it's not quite the same as, say, when you've got something you want to sell on a buy, sell, and swap forum, and you're not posting it in 5 different places and getting 5 different buyers. This is something you haven't created yet, and you can actually make difference. So, yeah,
you can, and it's a little. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a little dodgy to try and play publications off one another and kind of get a bidding war going, because you're not that valuable.
Definitely. Yeah, no, the open, honest approach definitely sounds like it was the key in that case. So, yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of the writing that you've done, you mentioned that people are sort of the thing that you enjoy writing about the most. Is there a favourite sort of theme around people that you enjoy writing about? Or is it mostly sort of individuals' kind of biographical style stories? Or what spin do you prefer sort of going after if you get the opportunity?
I guess that my favourite part of it is that they always surprise you. When you prepare an article, you have a thesis, you have an idea. I want to write an article about XYZ. I'm not an expert in XYZ. A journalist very rarely is an expert on any topic. They usually have to leverage other people's expertise. And so my job isn't to have opinions. My job is to seek expertise from others and write an article that leverages that expertise. And so usually, especially in any kind of enthusiast media, you very rarely have to challenge your thesis very much. So I'll come up with the story idea, I'll write my thesis, I'll go get interviews, those interviews back up my idea, and I write the article. Done. Yeah. But when you're writing about people, you get challenged all the time. You make assumptions about people, about their backgrounds, about their intentions. But when you get them into an interview and you work on them for a while, you get to honesty, and that honesty nearly always tricks you, nearly always challenges your original ideas. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the kind of live fire nature of that. It feels really nice to have someone surprise you, ideally in a positive fashion. I guess I did a series of interviews with some of the developers from Hi-Res Studios while I was over in Atlanta for the Smite World Championships. And over the course of those conversations, and over the course of about 3 days, working on the same interviews, multiple interviews with the same people, we ended up having a really frank and lovely conversation about the comparisons that were made between Overwatch and Paladins. And I never expected them to be willing to talk about that. They very explicitly had said publicly, we're making one statement about this on Reddit and we're not talking to the media. We're not going to post about it again. We don't want to have this conversation anymore. But we were able to kind of talk through that, and so my assumptions about what I would get out of those interactions were completely different. I expected to get a bunch of marketing about their upcoming games and DLC and all that stuff, and what I ended up getting was some really lovely, raw, passionate descriptions of the pain that all of the people in that studio went through. It's not a company, it's not an organization that has a position. This is a group of people who were hurt in a really big way by the way the community reacted to their game announcement.
Yeah. Bit of a remarkable story, that, I think.
It was really special. And I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity. I'm very thankful that I got to be in the room to hear it. And so that's what I mean. That's why I love talking about people, because they always surprise you.
Now, I noticed in your Twitter bio, Jason, you write recovering games journo. Does that mean since starting the Machine QA, you've stopped the freelancing?
I knew you were going to ask that question. Look, I did it as a joke because I ran out of bio space. I needed to reduce some characters. But the reality is I haven't written anything for the last 12 months. And that's not a secret. It's pretty obvious. I miss it dearly. And I guess Game Hugs gives me the ability to kind of keep doing the journos type stuff. I get to keep doing interviews, which is my favorite part of it. I do miss the writing itself, but yeah, I haven't done anything for the last year because I'm trying to start a business. It's been hard, to be honest. It's not simple. It's not easy. So having the kind of creative headspace to write articles on the side has not come as quickly as I'd hoped, but I'm not done. I'll be back. Yeah. It's just gonna be a matter of finding that space, I guess.
It's when you've got something you want to tell, a story that you want to write about, I'm sure it'll come all flowing back like riding a bike. Which, of course, is not what happens when you're writing, because you don't want to write and write at the same time. That would be super dangerous. But look, now, if there's one thing I love, Jason, it's a guest that actually sets up our own segues for us. So let's talk game hugs. I think that's a really good opportunity to sort of dive into that and sort of I guess is a bit of a follow-up piece in a little way for us, because when we had Yug on, probably going back nearly 2 years now, we did spend quite a bit of time talking about game hugs, because it was not long after he first sort of started the show, and it was in its infancy at that point. Things have, obviously evolved, and it's taken off quite a bit since then, and change of host, sort of with yourself coming on board and taking over the show now. So, I mean, how's the gig treating you since you sort of hopped into the host chair? What new or unexpected doors has it opened for you in terms of what work you've been doing?
It's wonderful. I really enjoy the show. I really enjoy it because, as I just said, I really miss a lot of the stuff about journalism that I don't get to do as much now. And this gives me the ability to interview people and not write up those interviews. It's great. I don't have to do the transcription. And again, I get to really focus in on what I guess what a really nice part of it is that I'm the one choosing who I'm speaking to. I'm not having to go to editors and pitch stories. I get to choose who I interview. I get to choose what angles we take. It's all kind of my decision. That feels really nice. That's lovely. And so it's been great over the last couple of episodes to have a chance to talk a bit more about industry and talk a bit more about ethics around overwork and crunch and all that stuff, to get really kind of philosophical with Shanglin Li in my most recent episode. Was a really nice change that no games publication would have allowed me to do on the record or in print. So I guess what I really love about doing that show is, again, just getting to speak to people and really specifically asking them to be honest and open. Whenever I record an episode of Game Hugs, I ask my guest to try their best not to do that thing that most interview guests do, which is have these cogs turning in the back of their head about whether or not they should answer a question.
Yeah.
Or how they should answer a question. Because nothing turns an audience off more than, we're not talking about that right now. And sometimes you can leverage that to create some kind of cool mystery type stuff, but it's usually a stab in the dark. And so what I like to say to my guests is, if you're coming on this show, I want you to be really honest. I'm not here to, scoop. I'm not here to dig dirt. I'm here to talk about you.
Yeah.
And if you want to cut stuff before we publish, I want to give you that freedom. But I'd really prefer it if you didn't take it. I'd just rather you be honest and open.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the result of doing that is by asking them to be open and asking them to be and giving them the ability to cut stuff if they want to, is they very rarely take it up. Very rarely. And usually it's because they said something stupid, not something that they're ashamed of or something they'd be embarrassed by. They stammered a bit and didn't love, the phrasing or something. It's very rare that they've taken out anything that they felt was inappropriate. Yeah. And so the result has been a really, in my opinion, like a marked difference in how those episodes feel now. They feel much more conversational, because they are. They're a conversation recorded from start to finish with no gaps.
No, I must admit, and I'm about to pay you a fairly significant compliment now, is that one of the things I've really enjoyed in the recent sort of iteration of the show, and your interview style in particular, is that it reminds me a lot of an Andrew Denton-esque approach to really sort of having a passive sort of role in the interview and asking some really important questions and contributing, significant parts where necessary, but really in such a laid-back manner that the focus is entirely on the other person, sort of, leading the discussion and sort of opening up and talking about what they want. And I think it's a quite extreme example of that skill on display. I think you seem to do it very naturally, so well done from me at the very least. Yeah,
thank you. That's incredibly kind of you. I think you're doing Andrew Denton a bit of a disservice, but I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you.
I said esque, not the same thing. I think that's an important thing to note. But that's it. Yeah, I mean, not every interview I feel needs to be that sort of exaggerated, sort of eccentric, excited kind of tone. I mean, that certainly has its place, and I mean, particularly when, say, Christian and I do this kind of thing, we tend to bounce off each other and play those roles, to a T well as well. But it doesn't have to be the way every single show plays out. So I appreciate having a good variety in my listening lineup, that's for sure. So it's good. But I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm very glad. Thank you very much.
So has there been any particular sort of challenging moments or big learning curves since you sort of took over, since you've been picking your guests and I guess managing that more on an intimate basis? What have you actually found the most difficult since picking up Game Hugs and running with it? Has there been something you can call out in particular?
Yeah, I think the process is the hardest part. So I'm currently releasing episodes on a roughly fortnightly basis. Mm-hmm. I'm not married to that. This year is for work and other reasons. This year has been really intense on my time, and unfortunately, Game Hugs doesn't earn me any money yet. I've got some things in the works that might pay off soon. I hope. So that means it's the first thing that kind of has to get pushed to create space for me to be more responsible as a company owner or as a father or a husband. So I guess the main challenge is just that process. It's quite time consuming to do one of those episodes. Each recording, the episodes usually go for about an hour, but the recording time is usually around 2. Then I've got post, and then I've got to do imagery, and then I've got to write the blog post, and then I've got to send emails to all the media partners, and there's just quite a bit of time in all that. So turning that into a process that's quick and repeatable has been a real challenge. A big step forward was I had the wonderful Julian Wilton, one of the creators of Adventure Pals, volunteer to do a rebrand for us, which was fantastic. I'm really in love with the direction that our brand's taken. And as part of that, he created a whole bunch of Photoshop templates that I can use to basically take the imagery process down from hours to minutes each week, which has been a huge difference. So I highly recommend it. If you're not a Photoshop expert, which I am not, find someone who is and ask them to help you make some templates.
Yeah, absolutely.
That stuff made a huge difference.
Yeah, or find a YouTube channel that is. It's my other recommendation. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yes, absolutely. If you're less lazy than me, then find a YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm not going to ask you to pick favourites, but is there an interview that stands out in your mind as one of the most enjoyable that you've done?
I have a very soft spot for Shangulin, so I really enjoyed that most recent episode. I love his work and I love his weird, amazing brain. So he's a wonderful person to speak to. I also really, really enjoyed talking to Ken Wong. He's got an incredible story. So chatting with him,
so that's Ken Wong from Monument Valley, of course.
Yeah, he works at Mountains. He runs Mountains. What I'm going to say without naming the publication is I've been working on a feature about Ken for about a year and a half, and haven't published it because of a whole bunch of time reasons. But we've done, I reckon, 15 interviews over the course of that period to develop the feature, and it'll go up one day. It's pretty timeless. Ken's an interesting enough character. But what was amazing was, despite the fact we'd done 15 interviews before, and I feel like I know Ken very well, the interview we did for Game Hugs was a real surprise. It was really lovely, and I learned a whole bunch more about him that I hadn't learned through the other interviews. So, again, people surprise you.
Nice. And yet to come, who is the top of your future interview hit list, if you had to name some names?
So I've got a few secret ones that I won't talk about. I'm looking at speaking to, and I won't name him by name because it might the individual in question might change within the company. But I'm looking at interviewing someone from 11-bit, the creators of Frostpunk and This War of Mine, pretty soon. Yep. That should happen pretty soon. I've also got some pretty exciting stuff in the works for GCAP and PAX. I'm sorry, I don't want to announce anything now because I'd like to be a little bit coy about my release schedule because it changes so much.
Yeah.
You'll notice that I don't say welcome to episode number because those episode numbers often change. Yeah. I might record an episode and not publish it for weeks or weeks and weeks.
So it's the beauty of not having time sensitive content as well. To a certain extent, you can backlog your episodes a little bit and plan that out a bit more carefully. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. One that I am happy to announce is I'm going to get Luke Lancaster back on again to talk about his experience. I spoke to him just before PAX. He's him taking over as the content manager of PAX Australia.
Yep.
And I want to get him back on again post PAX and in the lead up to the next one. To talk about how much he's learned and how hard it is and all of that stuff. And also grill him about some of the power dynamic stuff that we touched on in the previous episode.
Yeah, very cool. And you can ask him how his slow descent into Pokemon Go is progressing.
It has been not at all slow.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's move into chatting about, I think the project that's been taking up most of your time, Jason. That's the machine QA.
Yes.
So this is QA, not question and answers. This is quality assurance, right?
Yes, QA, not Q and A.
Not
yes.
Q and A, yeah. And I think
the number of people who I see mess that up.
yeah. So QA is something that I think a lot of people reckon they understand, but probably have no idea what it actually involves. So why don't you just give us a bit of an elevator pitch for what your business actually does?
Sure. I'm going to open that by describing my biggest mistake with it so far, which was calling it the machine QA. Because I come from a corporate quality assurance background, working on making professional services software, or for government clients. And there, QA means something in particular, which is it's testing, it's software testing, where we write test cases and execute them and log bugs. And it's a whole bunch of other stuff. And so we don't just call it testing, we call it QA because that implies much more. But it seems I've learned in games that's the opposite's true. QA just means testing stuff. It means coming on a week before a major milestone, headbutting it and seeing what bugs fall out. And so it kind of has made it quite hard to pitch my company to potential clients. So I guess that's the message there, is that QA is a lot more than just the testing part, which is important to note because my company has a whole bunch of competitors offshore, overseas, who specialize in having lots of people who can get lots of testing done in a relatively short space of time. And we're a much smaller outfit, so I'm never going to compete on that scale. So the difference that we provide and the reason that name has caused me some trouble is that we're local, we're here, we are available during most people's within this time zone, within most people's office hours. So we can answer the phone, we can respond to questions in the same day, which many offshore companies don't have the luxury of doing. And we care a lot more about the full scope of quality assurance for a game studio than some of these other companies tend to. And so what that usually looks like is I will embed myself into a studio, or one of my others will embed themselves into a studio, and they'll become part of that team. They'll dial into daily stand-ups. They'll really be a part of it. They'll get to know people. And we work much more on we do the contract testing, but we'll also work on helping establish a much more rigorous quality assurance pipeline throughout the process. We'll help studios refine their management style to make room for QA, so that if after we leave they want to employ people into those roles, all of that stuff's already established. So we're doing a lot more of that consultancy these days as well. It's been a really interesting shift.
The word that's coming to mind for me is like a holistic approach. Like it's like you're taking care of the whole instead of just having being a QA farm that people just sit down and run into the corners and see if they fall through the world. You're sort of taking this whole everything at once sort of approach, which is pretty cool.
It's really cool. It's also hard to sell. It's it's a hard thing to quantify. I can't walk into a studio and say I'm going to save you $20,000 this year.
So if it is so hard to describe and sell, what made you choose to start the Machine QA? What was the spark that lit the fire?
So the main thing was, there are a few. The main things were that I had some business partners who approached me and said, no one's doing this. We've done a bit of a market analysis and there's no one else offering this service, and we'd like to see it happening. And we think if we kicked something off, we would be the only ones in the market. But we don't have any QA experience. So who are we going to find who can do this, but also knows everybody? So they came and knocked on my door and I said no. And it took a few weeks for me to change my mind. But, I was pretty in love with my journo career primarily. But it's not that often people want to found a company under you. And a company that uses the expertise that you haven't had a chance to exercise for a few years, as well as a whole bunch of cool friends that you've made over the last few years. So that was one of the main catalysts. The other was that I know we can make a pretty big difference to the way that people handle this stuff in Australia. We did a bunch of surveying at the top of the company, and one of the big gaps was QA, and just a pretty broad misunderstanding and lack of budget toward QA for most of the studios in the country that responded to the survey.
It's interesting that it's even an industry level misunderstanding. I would have thought that it was more so on the sort of consumer that had this misunderstanding, but even the industry is getting it wrong.
Well, we have to remember that the Australian industry is built on ashes and realistically is only 7 years old. All of our large studios, bar a couple, shut down, as I'm sure you're aware, during the big crash. And what we have now is a few large-scale established studios and a whole bunch of smaller ones. And one thing many people will know about small businesses is they don't have a huge amount of cash to throw around on things like contract services. So something we've been working on the last few months is pivoting a bit. We're doing less of the contract testing, and we're focusing more on the consulting side of the business, which means I'm able to go into studios and assess where they're at, help train the team in QA so that there's more of a responsibility for quality assurance right across the team if they're not in a position to employ or contract people into that role straight away. Help them define what a bug should look like, how to log bugs, how to identify where bugs are likely to show up, and also to establish them with a bunch of tools, issue tracking software and things like that have really clearly defined workflows and really clearly defined rigorous procedures involved in them that help them to do their jobs easily and to remove a bunch of the frustrations that come with making software, because you can externalize a lot of that onto the software then. You go, bloody Jira is making me do this, that, and the other thing. Oh, I guess it's just part of the process.
Not Jira. I know Jira.
I have a love-hate relationship with Jira. I can talk about that for hours. I'm not going to bore you with it, though.
Yeah. No. I think that, what you mentioned in terms of lack of appetite potentially in the industry for QA, being like a symptom of lack of understanding out there, it seems accurate. I mean, the general consumer, I wouldn't expect to sort of understand QA much beyond the bare basics, and what you've described already with regards to bug testing is probably the extent of most people's knowledge of it. But when it comes to games development QA and how it differs from QA in other tech-based industries, how would you actually explain to the general layperson sort of what detail goes into games development QA? Like what's different? What actually stands out to make them understand?
Sure. So in a really extreme example, if you consider what kind of quality assurance would have to go into the creation of, a missile guidance system.
Yep, sure.
That's software.
Let's pick something nice and low risk, sure.
Yeah, that's the point. We're taking an extreme example, right? If that software that controls what those things do, where they do and don't go, and if a bug gets through the net and makes it into the production software that goes onto the missile, lives are at stake. And so the scale of quality assurance is much higher there. And the budget and the intensity of quality assurance is just a completely different thing in that context. And that's usually true of any large-scale software application. I worked on, many years ago, I worked on the new motor registry system for Tasmania. I led the testing on that project. And I had a team of 10 testers working with me on that, just on that one project, and we worked on it for years. And that's not true of... There are very few game studios, especially indie studios, who spend a huge amount of time on one game with a lot of people, because it costs too much money. So I guess the main difference is just in scope. A small studio doesn't have a massive QA budget, no matter how excited they are about their product, about their project. And so it then becomes a matter of deciding how we're going to do our testing to find as many of the most dangerous bugs as possible without breaking the bank. And that's the main difference. It's very procedural. It's not. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you the answer you wanted, which was, games is all about finding those parts where you fall through the edge of the world. It's very much about a difference in procedure, I think. I spend a lot of time helping, finding light ways of doing the kinds of processes that large scale QA companies do on a smaller scale and making them fit for their smaller studios. It's a big part of it.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And I think what you're talking about in terms of sort of setting up good practices and a foundation for QA within a business, sort of aided by a lot of the consulting work and getting involved in the everyday team stuff, makes a lot of sense as well. And I guess there's a big theme that's going on in the games industry at the moment, and has been for some time in recent years, sort of focusing around the health and well-being of people working inside those studio teams, and the battle against crunch being a big thing that keeps popping up. And that kind of stuff, it seems, is a big risk in terms of impacting the quality of games in development and the burnout of the people involved and all that sort of stuff. So what do you feel are the key sort of people and health related aspects of QA that maybe need a bit more of a spotlight shone on them?
Oh, that's an awesome question. So I guess the crunch thing is interesting because that's primarily a conversation about like the injustice of that is primarily a conversation about large scale studios, right? Which isn't really a factor in Australia. Crunch when it's at its most ugly is when a large scale company is saying your job is at risk if you don't put in bonkers hours every day to get this game over the line. But then you have the other side of crunch, which is kind of personally driven, and that's where we see people are at risk in the indie side. Is I've literally got my mortgage on the line here. I've remortgaged my house to make this game. I'm running out of money. We've just got to get it over the line. I'm just going to work and work and work and work to get the game finished. So that's kind of a self-driven crunch. And so that's a little bit more insidious because you're choosing to do it. And it can lead you to burnout before you even know it. As far as QA is concerned, our job is we do the testing, but we also have like quite a high level view of what the project is doing at all times. We're not project managers or producers. That's other people's jobs, but we have a similar kind of overview of a project. And so we have the ability to kind of jump in and say, we also manage risk, right? So we have the ability to jump in and say, this decision that we're barreling towards quite quickly is risky. Here's the kind of boundaries of that risk. Here's what's going to happen if that risk comes to pass. And here are a couple of ideas about what we could do to mitigate that risk and get out ahead of it and deal with it now. And risk management is a trained thing. That's something that people will spend thousands of dollars to take courses on. And it's something that I think would be of a lot of benefit for people in producing roles or QA roles to consider having a look at, because it can make a big difference, and you can get out ahead of a lot of that personal pain that comes from overwork and stuff in passion industries.
I've just got a question for a topic that I just find personally interesting, which is recently Rami Ismail, he tweeted the concept of broadening the net of who is considered a game developer. And in your experience, do you think that QA, in your role, would you call yourself a dev on these projects, a part of the game development process?
Yeah. So, I mean, nomenclature is a problem in the games industry in general.
Games writer versus games journalist, for example.
Yeah, totally. And generally, in most industries or in most aspects of humanity, nomenclature is driven by universities, by
academic institutions.
Thank you very much. Academia. And games academia is very young. It's very young. And so it really hasn't had a chance to establish that nomenclature. And so nomenclature right now is being driven by the media and by consumers. And so to answer your question, I wouldn't consider myself a game developer, because to me a developer is primarily a programming role. I would consider myself lumped into the group of game makers. I think game makers are people who contribute to games projects, and I think absolutely quality assurance falls into that role. There's an interesting discussion around the idea of whether a QA person, a testing person, should feel it's appropriate to make suggestions, design suggestions. And it totally depends on who you're working with and the culture of that studio. But we do get to do it more than people think, I reckon, because part of our job is consumer advocacy. Part of our job is being able to say, this is going to feel bad for the consumer. This is not going to feel good for the player. What if we did things like this? What if we shifted it slightly this way? What if we considered melding these two things together? We can make suggestions toward design ideas that then the designers can grab and go, "Oh, look, I just had an idea," and they can go away and they can design something really cool. And we can kind of feel like we've contributed to the design of the project in that way. In fact, a feature that I suggested and worked pretty hard on for a game that we have been involved with recently was very specifically called out on a podcast that I love dearly as being a really positive part of that player's experience, and that was the most gratifying thing. It was amazing. I'm generally on the other side of those conversations as the journal or the podcast host.
Yeah.
So getting to hear someone talking positively about something that I designed was spine-tinglingly exciting.
Yeah,
I'm a game maker.
I really like that. I really like what you're doing with the machine QA. I see it as kind of raising the profile of QA a bit, because I've seen this perception of QA as kind of the lowest rung in the business, and that they're not, like, QA people are just there to do a job, and they're not really there to creatively contrwant anyway.
Almost like an afterthought.
Yeah. So I really admire what you're doing, and I think it's great for the industry. I want you to get more work, and I want more people like you to pop up. So
thank you. I'd love to see more career QA people showing up, people who actually want to do QA because they think it's cool, not because they want to get into they get a foot in the door at the studio or whatever. Yeah. I've had a lot of people apply for jobs at the machine since we launched, which is wonderful. Thank you. Please keep doing that. But also a lot of them really specifically say I really want to be something else, and QA seems like a great path toward that, which it's very easy for me to cynically read that as I would like to come work for you for a while so that I can get a job somewhere else. Which, that's just that's the reality of QA. I'm not surprised by that. It's just funny seeing it popping up in the applications themselves, in the cover letters.
A little too honest.
Yeah, just slightly honest. If someone came to me and said, I love QA and I want to do it forever, I'd be hard pressed to turn them down.
Yeah. Well, I want to finish on a bit of a challenging question, Jason, and if you can't answer this one, that's okay, but I expect that you've probably at least thought about it. So you mentioned at the beginning of talking about the QA stuff that you thought that you'd picked the wrong name for the business, the machine QA, and that you would have gone with something else, given everything that we've just spoken about. So with all of that sort of taken into account and everything we've just covered, what would you call it that you think would actually really sort of create the image that you want to sell of what you do now?
Sure. I really love the name The Machine. I'm really happy with that. And that's mostly what we call it internally, and that's mostly what our clients tend to call it as well.
Yep.
It's just the term QA is the damaged part of that.
Right.
There's no better term for me to use, I don't think, especially now that we're doing more consulting than we are actual testing. But the reason I love The Machine is because I really like... we spent weeks coming up with a name. You should see the document. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's so bad. There are so many terrible suggestions in there.
Well, give us one of the terrible suggestions then. I think we at least need an example of where things could have gone wrong.
I think my favourite, in pure desperation, we were looking at the thesaurus for different we could type testing into a thesaurus and look at all the thesaurus options against testing.
Yep.
And we'd look at what testing is in different languages, and we're just utterly desperate to find something. I can't think of any specific examples off the top of my head, but I do love the name The Machine because I really like the idea that our clients can kind of grab us and attach us to the side of their business to make it run more smoothly. Like a little kind of machine, right?
Yeah.
I really like that idea. There are negative connotations to the idea of a machine kind of churning things through and stuff. I get that, but that's not my chosen definition.
No, that's fair. It could have been a lot worse. You could have gone with something like, big testes and had a tagline like "We're on the ball" or something like that. So, machine sounds pretty rad to me. Absolutely. No, it's good. All right. Well, hey, look, we've gotten you talking for quite a while now. I'm going to give you a break and let you chat about some fun stuff. And as a QA specialist and a podcast host and a writer and games journo, and whatever time you have left available to you, which hasn't been recent, but nonetheless, you still get some time to play some games, right? I hope that's going to be. Yeah. So, I mean, let's chat about that. What have you been playing lately, and what's got your eye at the moment, Jason?
I think I've been playing a lot of stuff in small chunks in spare time. Mm-hmm. But the thing that really has grabbed me recently has been Frostpunk. That's part of why I want to chat to 11-bit for Game Hugs pretty soon.
Nice.
It's because I totally fell in love with Frostpunk, and I did not expect to. Because I hate city builders. Always have. I find them boring. I'm bad at them. The game, usually I'll get to a point where I'm failing at everything, and those games tend to not do a good enough job of telling me why and what I can be doing about it. Or at least maybe I'm just not smart enough to play them. I don't know. I'm usually bad at them. Mm-hmm. But with Frostpunk, I don't know what it is about it, but when I get in trouble in that game, I just sink my teeth into it, and I hold on and I fight to survive. And if I fail, I feel like I've learned enough that I want to go back and try those scenarios again, and do things a bit differently this time. It's a delightful game. Have you both played it?
No, I haven't actually.
Yeah, I haven't played it, but I know a fair bit about it. From what I understand, it's a very tough resource management survival sim. Would that be an apt description?
Yeah, totally. It's definitely tough. And it's, it is a city builder in that you're placing buildings and you have people that you can't control. You give them jobs and they go do them if they can. It's definitely in that spirit. But it's got this really wonderful, really harsh, desolate kind of feel to it because it's set in this post-apocalyptic world where everything's cold all the time. And so you have this enormous coal-fed generator that you use to generate heat for your city. And if you stuff up and the heat goes out, you feel it. Like it's physically uncomfortable when that happens. Because you see these useless tents that your poor city dwellers are living in just get frosted over, and you see the number of people who are sick and dying go up and up and up and up overnight. It's heart-wrenching to watch.
It's crazy.
I might have to check that out because city builders is normally like a genre that I shy away from and don't really enjoy. Like on the podcast a couple of months ago, we covered RimWorld, and I didn't really that didn't really grab me, and I don't really like that sort of thing. But if you're saying that this is an exception to that, I might need to check it out. This is something that can convert me.
Yeah, this one's really internally good too. Like you don't need to, like with RimWorld or with Dwarf Fortress or any of those really intense ones, you need to spend a lot of time in media outside the game to learn about it. But Frostpunk, I only had to look up a couple of things because there are a couple of little UI quirks that I didn't quite grasp, and I had to Google how to work those out. But yeah, otherwise it was wonderful just inside the game. And I also really liked the fact that you can make some pretty harsh decisions in that game. Like your skill tree as it is basically a bunch of policies that you can choose. And so you can choose to make children work. You can choose to sign the policy for child labour.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that came up in exact conversation with one of our friends today over WhatsApp.
Right.
So any game that allows you to sign a child slave labour policy into law gets the stamp of approval from them. Sort of thing.
Yeah, but what's neat is that the game doesn't punish you for doing it.
Yeah,
it does in very slight ways. But if mechanically the game, if you sign the child labour law, you get more workers and you can do more stuff.
Wow,
it's that simple. But it punishes you in narrative and it punishes you ethically, right? I found myself getting to the point where, okay, I'm going to sign this law out of desperation. But as soon as I've got enough workers, I'm pulling all the kids out of jobs and they can not work.
Yeah.
The game would never, I get no mechanical benefit for doing that, but I feel better about myself.
Nice. Yeah, I think part of the reason why I didn't pick it up at the time is because it was released really close to when a game that was a little similar in the way that it was a city builder sort of under pressure called They Are Billions came out. And I played a ton of that when it first released, and I was still sort of well in the thrall of that thing when Frostpunk launched. But I just checked because we actually run a monthly segment called Party Game of the Month, which is an opportunity for us to sort of dig into some of the indie game backlog and do sort of like a spotlight review every month. And we get people to submit games to that list, and we pick one randomly every single month. And I thought that Frostpunk was on our list, Christian, but I've just checked and it is not.
Does it meet our stringent criteria?
I'm pretty sure it does, but if we put it on the list, that means we have to wait for it to roll up as opposed to just going ahead and playing it. So let's just play the damn thing.
Yeah, good idea.
And maybe do it that way. So yeah, but that is a good recommendation. I've heard excellent things for sure. So yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else besides Frostpunk taking your fancy at the moment? Has that been the big thing in the recent week or so?
That's been the main thing. I have my guilty pleasure of playing Sniper Elite 4. After a recent Steam sale, I picked that up, and I've been shooting Nazis in the gonads. That's been
nothing wrong
nice.
with that.
Oh man, it's so cathartic. But it's also like completely brainless. There's a cool kind of puzzle layer to that game which I enjoy. The idea of, if you want to stealth your way through one of those levels, you have to find a way to deal with enemies in such a way as to open up avenues for you to pass through the level and get to objectives without making a bunch of noise. I enjoy that kind of exercise, but there's nothing clever about it. I could not give a rat's whatever about the story in that game. I skip a lot of the cutscenes.
It has a story? I didn't even think the game would have a story.
Right. I don't even know I don't even know the protagonist's name. I don't care. Like it's I'm sure it's good, and apologies to the developer and the narrative designers, but the reason I'm there to play that game is because it's satisfying to shoot Nazis in the nuts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it gives me a break from work. That's what it's for.
Yeah. Big Testes, I told you, it's a great name for a company. Anyway.
I'll keep it in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, speaking of guilty pleasures, Christian and I would be blatantly lying if we didn't say that we'd spent an inordinate amount of time since our discussions last week playing more Minecraft with the aquatic update. So
hook, line, and sinker.
Yep, pardon the many puns. How are you sitting on that at the moment, Christian? What's your recent activities that are fun and exciting that you'd like to tell everyone about?
All right, well, I've just started a project today, which I'm pretty excited about, which is one of our other friends, Adrian, who we had on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. He's set up a base far to the south of the sort of central area. And I want to create a series of Rohan to Gondor style beacon towers. Now, you mentioned something like this before too, Luke.
Yeah. We had the idea of maybe setting some up so that you could actually set a light yourself by firing flaming arrows into. So, yeah.
I've started doing that. So I'm going to create a chain of beacons that will link the kingdoms, so to speak. And I'm pretty excited to do that.
That is awesome.
But yeah, other than that, I demolished my starting crappy little house that I just built to get going, and I built a nice big open modern house with lots of glass windows and stuff. It looks very pretty. Nice hedge around the outside. So I've got myself some more flash digs, and yeah, not much else.
No, I've got the problem at the moment of too many projects that I want to start, and actually finishing one is proving to be the challenge. So I've got a big open building area at the moment that I kind of want to close off and not let anyone in until it's all complete, but that's not always possible. So
You're always working on weird secret projects that always sound deadly.
Yeah, they usually are, and that's more of a tourist deterrent than anything else. But it's good fun too. I treat the game as almost like a build your own video game kind of simulator. Like the most fun thing in Minecraft to me is actually creating games within the game where you can have your own little adventure I guess dungeon which you build and invite people in to not only check out your work but also work out the puzzles that you've sort of set up within. And sure, a number of those puzzles are quite deadly in nature, which adds to the fun. But it's a good time, man. It's exactly a good time. So
I think you're just a bit sadistic, Luke.
I may just be a little bit sadistic. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. But I have also been sinking a bit of time this week into the opening portion of one Octopath Traveller.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Which has been good fun. So now I know that you started as the hunter character, didn't you?
Yes,
the
Hanit,
Aloy chick. Yeah.
Could say that.
Yeah. So how do you pronounce her name again? Because I know there's some weird language stuff going on with her story. So
Hanit, I think, but I've been playing it in Japanese, so I'm not sure about the English.
Now, from what I heard, and maybe you can corroborate this or not from your experience, there was a lot of discussion this week, sort of in wider circles, about some of the old English-style language that was used.
I can't stand it.
Yeah. You're finding it quite the barrier to entry? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just too far. It's like they turned the old English up to 11. Because this is even just in the writing. I don't know about the spoken English, but the actual written English, it's I haven't played a game since Final Fantasy Tactics that has cranked it up to 11 on the ye old English scale, and it's I don't know, I don't really like it.
All right. Well, what about the rest of the game in general? How are you finding it?
Oh, I love that the game. It's amazing. Just beautiful to look at. This I don't know how they've done it. This 3D 16-bit depth of field, beautiful masterpiece. I don't know. I can't get enough of how the game looks. And the combat system is great. We'll probably go in depth, think maybe next week once I've played more of it, but just initial thoughts. Yeah, the combat's great. Not quite as good as the Bravely Default combat, which is the high watermark for JRPG systems, I think now. Turn-based systems anyway. But yeah, beautiful. And the soundtrack, I've tweeted a bunch about how much I'm in love with the soundtrack, and I've already got a couple of YouTube playlists with my favorite tracks. Because, just beautiful orchestral pieces, piano, and it's lovely, lovely game. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really loving it as well. I mean, as you were, I was right into those sorts of, 16-bit RPGs when I was much younger. One of my favorites of all time is Breath of Fire 2, and this is reminding me a lot of that in certain aspects as well. So, yeah, I'm playing as Ulberic, who's the warrior character, the disgraced hedge knight.
I haven't encountered him yet.
Yeah, he's kind of cool. I think he's a bit more of your vanilla style sort of, warrior who failed to fulfill his duty and now he's a bit of an outcast kind of story. We've all heard that one before. But no, it's good. Like one thing that I think really strikes me about the game is that the balance with the voice acting that they've put in, just talking about the sound, is a really good one where some of the key scenes are voice acted really well, which is uncommon for these style JRPGs because they don't tend to have a lot of heavy voice acting unless the whole thing's done that way. But then sort of in the less important scenes, it kind of reverts back to that typical, for sure, well met kind of, just quotes as opposed to reading out everything that pops up in the speech bubbles. It's just kind of to accentuate the character interactions as opposed to narrate the entire thing. So they've spaced it out quite well. It's not overdone and it's appropriate for the scenes. I'm really digging it. Like you, I think that the graphic style and the visual aesthetics are incredible. It reminds me a lot of when the 3DS first came out, and there was a number of Nintendo 3DS games that got launched where often it looked best sort of on the very lowest bar of the 3D settings, so it was just a tiny bit of depth of field, but not quite that much.
Yep.
The way they've used shadows and light on the screen kind of gives me that impression. So, yeah, it's interesting.
I had the same thought with the 3DS too. Like it is very reminiscent of turning the 3D up a little bit in Bravely Default. It has that kind of pop-up book look to it.
Yeah, exactly that. That's a great analogy, actually. I think that's a good one. Yeah. So JRPGs, Jason, is this something that appeals to you at all, or is this one completely off your radar?
Yeah, look, I downloaded the demo, and so I'm going to be a little bit of a voice of dissent here.
Go for it.
Because I played... What was the name of your Hedge Knight character again?
Ulbrich. Yep.
Ulbrich. I chose Ulbrich as well because he seemed relatable. He seemed... Not relatable. He seemed... I felt like I knew what that story was going to be about because it feels like a very told story, and I was a little disappointed at just how far down that path they decided to go. Like, he is a disgraced hero who was completely amazing and is ashamed of how amazing he was because he made a mistake that he's blaming himself for. And of course there's a kid who sees through all that and thinks he's amazing anyway, and he uses the kid as a springboard to feel better about himself and move on to greater things, blah blah blah. But we've heard this story before, and so I kind of got turned off by how rote that felt. But by the sounds of what you're saying, I should probably just start again with a different character. And I might not have so much of a drama with that issue.
Now, I think a bunch of the characters are quite tropey in their origins. Like, there's the Master Thief and the Shrine Maiden and a few sort of JRPG tropey characters in there. But I think it's the systems of the game that hold everything together for me. I haven't progressed far enough into the sort of main thrust of the narrative to really be a judge of that yet. But yeah, the systems are the joy for me.
I have it on reasonably good authority that the story for him comes good, further into the game. So I'm hoping that that's the case. Yeah,
sure. I'm very hopeful of that as well. This is the thing that JRPGs do, right? It's and this isn't a shot across the bow of JRPGs. It's a product of the fact that they're big, complex, highly narrative driven. And they're a lot of work to make because they have a lot of different... This one in particular has so many characters that all have backstories and stories to tell. And games of that style tend to use a lot of shortcuts when they're designing their characters, in narrative shortcuts. I can create a Hedge Knight who's ashamed of his past because people know what that is, and I don't need to do a whole bunch of backstory writing to establish that. It's a really quick shortcut to background a character. So I totally understand it. I think maybe I just need to pick one that isn't as obvious to me. Maybe I need to pick one that feels weird instead and see what happens then.
They haven't gone for the cheapest JRPG tactic, which is main character with amnesia. That's the worst one.
Yeah, that's another
main character with amnesia who's also very young and inexperienced in the world. Yes.
Now, I was just going to say, fun fact, the reason I chose Ulbrich as mine is because I'm planning on playing this game, hopefully to see through every character's story. But the names of all the characters, the first letter of them actually spells out Octopath. So I chose Ulbrich because it's the first one in that sequence. So there you go.
Pretty meta.
Nice one.
Yeah, I don't know if they actually call that out anywhere. I think that's something that a few people have realised, and that's kind of done the rounds now, but they weren't heavy-handed about it, which is kind of cool. So the weirdest thing I've found about the game so far, just before we sort of wrap up on it, is when you're in combat, I find that the style of graphic sort of representation of the characters for all of the enemies changes. So you've got these, very large kind of, realized drawings of what these characters look like, whereas you still stay as this small pixel character, and the scale is way out of whack. I just find it's really bizarre that choice they made with that. It looks like you're fighting these giant foes, that are a lot more detailed than you actually are, as opposed to using some of the hand-drawn artwork of the characters that you see on the game, case cover. So it was a strange decision. I don't know.
I did a tweet about that, just saying big man energy, and there's just my little character and then a giant butler who's like 50 feet tall.
Yeah.
I do wonder why they do that, because that's quite a JRPG trope to have cutscenes or some other breakaway from main gameplay, which looks completely different to the primary gameplay.
Yeah.
So I wonder why they haven't spread that across to the main characters. I hadn't thought about that before. It's interesting.
I have no idea. But I don't know. Maybe we'll see some different representations of them further in.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe we should ask them and find out.
Yes. If only somebody had a show in which it would be appropriate to get some of the developers from that game on for an interview. Maybe we should...
What, you mean like Party Loaded? Yeah, great.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, just kicking into a little bit of industry news commentary this week. So there's been a few things happening. I wanted to just briefly chat about something that dropped out of the blue after a little bit of teasing from one Mr. Nathan Fillion earlier in the week. So there's been some fan pressure for quite some time for Nathan Fillion, who we all know as Mel Reynolds from Firefly, as well as many other roles across the Whedonverse and, Castle and all sorts of other stuff. Everyone knows who Nathan Fillion is. But a lot of people wanted him for the official Nathan Drake role should an Uncharted movie ever happen. Now, it's pretty clear that's not going to happen anytime soon. And the early talk that I remember was them sort of casting Tom Holland in that role. I don't know if that's still on or not. It's sort of doing a younger spin on the character. But it turns out that he has just gone ahead and gotten involved in a fan film to do just that anyway. So have you guys seen this 15-minute video that leaked earlier in the week?
I haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally chomped that down as soon as I saw it.
What were your thoughts, Jason?
I really wanted to see him in that role.
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably getting on a bit for it now.
That was my concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because I think he would have been perfect for it back in the Firefly kind of era. But having said that, he's clearly passionate about it. Like he really absorbs Nathan Drake, but he also isn't a method actor. He puts a lot of himself into that role as well. And there's a lot of similarities between the type of character he tends to play and Nathan Drake. So I think it works pretty well.
Yeah.
I really like the dude they got to play Sully. I thought he was a fun fit.
Yeah, I forget the actor's name, but it was the guy who played the general in Avatar.
Yes.
Yeah, I've completely forgotten his name now. And I recognise the actress they got to play Elena Fisher as well, as being from a recent TV series, but I'm going to embarrass myself and look it up later. But yeah,
don't look them up, because fact-checking ruins podcasts.
No, that's it. That's
right.
not what we're here for. We're here for the hot takes, not the actual facts. Absolutely. Yeah, but if you haven't seen it already, you should go and check it out. It's on pretty much everywhere you will search online. YouTube would be a good place to start. But it reminded me a little bit in one particular scene of the Doom live-action movie, where they actually go a little bit too gameplay with it, and there's a third-person action scene where he's in a gunfight where you could literally overlay the game HUD on top of him, and it would be that. So
yeah, that felt a bit on the nose to me. I dropped out of it at that point. I kept watching, but I lost attention.
Yeah, exactly. But as a fan film, they can afford to do some fun stuff like that, so that's all right.
So was it Fillion? Like, was he the driver behind it, or did a fan film get it together and then get him involved?
That's a really, really good question. I know that it was directed by Alan Ungar, so obviously he's got some other people involved in driving the project. But I think that they worked on it collaboratively, is the impression I'm getting. So it wasn't authorized or endorsed by Sony or Naughty Dog or anything like that. So it's just a passion project, which is great. So yeah, Ungar's a Canadian writer-director, and he's specialised in doing action film stuff before. So there's a couple of features to his name, from what I understand. He did a movie called Gridlocked, and another one which I never heard of called Tapped Out. So he's obviously got some chops in that area. But no, it's cool to have some passion projects and things you can share with people that are equally passionate about it. So it's a fun thing to see. So
totally,
yeah. There you go. Now, speaking of other fun things, are you guys up to speed on some of the stuff that Epic Games has been up to in the last week or so? So, Epic, of course, the makers of current absolute global phenomenon, Fortnite. So they're pretty big in the news this year. They've been making some waves. Fortnite Season 5 has just kicked off, so there's a lot going on in that space at the moment. But it's probably not the thing that caught my attention earlier in the week, because Epic have actually just changed one of their policies with regards to the amount of money that they pay to asset makers working on Unreal Engine assets. So developers now are going to be getting 88% of the profits, which is 12% less than what... 12% is left to Epic, but that's a change from the previous model, which I believe was a 70-30 or something close to that. But the thing that is really blowing me away is that Epic have said since the share change, they're actually going to pay that out retroactively as well. So
that's incredible.
Yeah. So...
It's a really smart move. It's a super smart move because they have the money to do it now. I mean, just yesterday there was an announcement that they just earned their first $1 billion from in-game purchases alone from Fortnite.
Just a casual billion, you know.
Just a casual billion. And what do we know from games as a service? If they're popular, they only get more popular. So that game's going to continue to make money for the next 10 plus years. This is a really smart move for them because it's going to draw more people across to the Unreal platform, which is what they really need. The only kind of dissent I've seen about the issue is that it could actually have pretty significant tax implications, depending on how certain companies in certain countries are set up.
Okay.
If they get a sudden influx of cash, that could cause tax dramas for them. But other than that, it seems like a really smart play.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's not, completely philanthropic because they're obviously trying to drive people to use Unreal. But look, at the end of the day...
they really need right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and they were quite upfront about the fact that they have the money now due to Fortnite so they can afford to, they're like, we got this one, no problem. But the thing that I love about it is that the content creators that it's really going to benefit are typically going to be the small indie sort of ones or the, the individuals out there that are going to see a much bigger impact than this from this money than another company using Unreal assets. An interesting question came up about whether is PUBG going to get any of this? But no, obviously not. They're not going to see benefits.
Not without going through a court.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was kind of amusing. Yeah,
I was surprised to see Octopath Traveller is on Unreal.
Really?
Yeah, Japanese studios, quite often they'll use in-house built from the ground up engines. But yeah, Octopath's actually running on Unreal.
Wow, okay. I did not expect that. There you go. Although I guess in hindsight, I can't think of any other engines that it would be better fit on. But yeah, I don't know. That's cool. All right, so Nintendo Labo Creators Contest was another thing that happened this week. So did anyone catch any of the highlights and any of the funky creations that came out of that thing?
Yeah, I had a bit of a look through the winners and some of the notable entrants. Some super creative stuff in there. Like I think my favorite is the alarm clock. So the best Toy Con mod is an alarm clock made out of the piano kit, and it looks like a little house, and it's just adorable. And the kid made a nice little screen overlay that covers up part of the screen and gives it a nice effect. And yeah, that was a nice one. And then the best decorated was a really cool Legend of Zelda style mod for the piano box, where there's a Master Sword sort of sitting in the top of the box and little bushes, and yeah, it looks really, really nifty. And then there was I haven't actually watched the video on how this one works, but there's a teapot Labo mod somebody made. That I have to actually watch this tea time management game with Nintendo-inspired tea flavors such as Boolong and Cappy Mill. Cappy Mile. But yeah, I want to actually look up what's going on there because I don't know how you make a teapot out of Labo, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, motion tilt controls probably.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you have it's kind of like Cook Serve Delicious. You have customers coming into a store, and you need to serve them cups of tea as they come in. But to do that, you need to fill the teapot by opening the lid, and then it slowly fills up, and the lid has a Joy-Con attached to it. And then you close the lid, and then you tilt the teapot forward, and it fills up the customer's cup.
That is so cool.
It's quite clever. I really enjoyed the accordion. I thought that was really clever.
Oh, the solar powered accordion.
Yeah. It's it's using more of the technology than some of the others, because it also has the left Joy-Con, which has the IR camera in it, pointing at some holes in a cardboard box. So if you're outside, then it can sense sunlight coming through the holes, and when you put your fingers over the holes, it'll play different accordion notes.
Oh wow!
And then it uses the motion sensor in the other Joy-Con, which is in the other side of the accordion, to change the volume of the note output based on how you're tilting it and moving it as you're kind of squeezing the accordion in and out. I thought that was really clever.
Yeah. So it's one of the greatest sort of surprises and I hope not tragedies of what Nintendo sort of spoke about at E3, the fact that there was no further Labo projects mentioned. I hope that there's going to be something before the year is out because, given the wacky creativity of this stuff, I think it would be a terrible tragedy if it sort of gets shelved after the initial release and we don't see any more from it because, man, there's some potential. There's some nut stuff out there.
I haven't committed to it. I really want to do this with my kids, but damn, it's expensive. And my kids will destroy it within 10 minutes of it being made, and I'll have to buy more of it, which is the most amazing DLC plan I've ever heard.
How old are your kids now? Is that a huge risk or...
It's a very high... I have 5 kids.
Wow.
My oldest are twins. They're 8, and I have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
Okay, that's the broad
this
range of risk that you need to manage for sure, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. No, my 9-year-old son recently had his birthday, and I picked up the basic Labo kit, not the robot one, but the variety pack. And I've been looking forward to an opportunity to sit down and build stuff with him. But knowing how time intensive it is, we haven't actually found the time to do it yet. So I'm gonna have to put that aside for a future weekend project, I think. But yeah, that's gonna be good times. All right. So what else we got on the list? We can chat a little bit of Pokemon Go. So there's been a bit of stuff going on this week around Pokemon Go Fest 2018, which, fun surprise, ran a hell of a lot better than last year, which was a disaster, if anyone can remember that.
Oh, yeah. No more refunds for flights and accommodation like they had to offer last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, there seems to be a real sort of upsurge in Pokemon Go at the moment, which is great to see. Like, even just today, there's a colleague that I've been working with for a couple of months now, and we haven't really talked a lot about sort of what we do outside of work because it's been pretty much on the job stuff. But just today, I learned that she's a Pokemon Go fiend. Like she's, one shy of top level, just this, quiet sort of lady that I've had barely any interaction with, and turns out she's like a fanatic, behind the scenes, just never even knew. So as of today, we've sort of shared friend codes and are gifting stuff to each other, and that's been really fun. But yeah, like it's been a big few months for Pokemon Go. They've released sort of leaks of what some of the next round of Pokemon are going to look like, but some of them from a mechanical sense actually are quite interesting because we're starting to get into the range of things now that you actually wonder how they're going to work translating over to this format game. So, for example, you've got the what is it? Smeargle, yeah. Smeargle's the one that copies moves from its opponent when it battles in the traditional Pokemon games. So
it's usually just got the sketch move, and it will just copy an opponent's move. So how is that going to work in Pokemon Go?
I've got no idea. That's a interesting dilemma. And you've got other ones which have like customizable forms, like Deoxys is one of the legendaries that you can actually in the main game sort of give it different upgrades to change its form, and then it basically becomes almost an entirely different creature stats wise and abilities wise. So how is that going to work? That's there's going to be some interesting challenges that they have to make from a design perspective, so I can't wait to see how they resolve some of that stuff. They've done a really good job with it so far, so yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like. But it seems that the fourth generation of monsters is going to be on its way soon, so the game just keeps getting bigger. It's man, it's going to be interesting to see where things are at after Christmas when this first round of Switch games come out. So yeah,
that's going to be a huge thing for Pokemon Go. Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of a second wind at the moment, but that might be just a perception thing based on our groups. But when the Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee come out, that'll be a true second wind, I think, for Pokemon Go.
Yep. So, Jason, have you been bitten by the Pokemon bug, or have you managed to avoid it so far?
I played it a bit when it launched, mostly in service of being able to write about it and talk about it on the radio.
Yep.
I haven't played it since then, primarily because going out walking is a luxury that I don't kind of make a huge amount of time for. And also, it just so happens that where I live, there are no footpaths on my street.
Nah.
I live in a weird little street that's just all road. So walking isn't really a thing I do, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's all right. Well, if you prefer gaming from the comfort of your own home and like to interact with people that way, there is now another game that previously did not offer such a feature that very, very soon will. So cast your mind back to a couple of years ago when we had the fairly eventful release of a little game called No Man's Sky, which is about to, next week in fact, have its major update introducing multiplayer to the game for the first time. Will it be enough to coax some people back? So what about you guys? Is this going to be something that actually interests you in No Man's Sky again? Or for the first time maybe? I don't know. Where do you land on that?
Honestly, I'm disappointed they're doing this.
Yeah? They didn't stick to their guns of the original sort of vision?
Nah, screw you idiots. Like, I really like the fact that we can say, you know how you thought it would take a week to add multiplayer? Well, it's taken how many years?
Yeah.
It's taken a long time. But I would rather they just didn't do it. Like, that game isn't a multiplayer game as far as I'm concerned. It's not. It's supposed to be solitary. Like, that's a key theme of that game. So adding multiplayer to it, and it might be rad. I don't know. I haven't had a look at it yet. I haven't even read about what they're adding for this particular update. But I am intrigued by it because I did try to go back to No Man's Sky about a month ago because I was intrigued by the big freighters and all of that stuff, but I completely bounced off the just frustratingly slow mining mechanic in that thing.
Yeah.
It feels so tedious, and on my second playthrough, I don't have the same wonder that I had from visiting different planets. It just felt very mechanical very quickly. So I'm hopeful that this update will add some stuff that might be able to draw me in and maybe make some of that stuff feel a bit smoother. But I'm not confident.
Yeah.
I'm still not totally sold on coming back. So I played around with the game a little bit when it first came out, but bounced off it pretty quickly. And it's actually the world generation changes in this No Man's Sky Next that I'm more interested actually than the multiplayer. So they've expanded again on the terrain generation and the number of sort of permutations there. So if that sort of gets cranked up to another level and there's a even greater variety of things to see, that could be enough to bring me back. But the multiplayer, and also because they're adding a third person mode as well, that's not a huge interest to me. We might have to get V on the podcast again to get her thoughts on it as a No Man's Sky fanatic.
Oh, she'll be super keen.
V was the reason I wanted to get back into it. So yeah, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, but I mean, I think V is also the poster child for exactly what you just described, which is the Zen approach to playing the game, because that's all about sort of stress release and relaxation therapy when you play in that manner. And I mean, I guess it also comes down to whether you have a game that currently fills that and you're stable currently, or whether this is it. So. And for me, at the moment, it's going to be a real tough timing thing because of how heavily, we're back into Minecraft currently, because that sort of scratches that itch in a large part. So
that's my Zen game for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. Look, I'm definitely going to jump back in and take a look because I think that there's certainly been enough additions since the early release to get me interested in checking out what game that has evolved into. But it's a tricky one. I fall a little differently to you, Jason. I think that multiplayer as an option is potentially a good thing for this game if that is the sort of thing that drives you and you don't like spending so much time alone. If you've at least got the option to do it, you certainly don't have to play it like that. But it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, just like it wasn't when it first launched. I don't think this is going to reinvent the game, from the ground up. It'll add a different incentive to some people, but maybe not enough. So yeah.
Oh, look, I may well very much enjoy how No Man's Sky does multiplayer. That isn't my concern. My concern is that I'd rather just be sticking it to the dirtbag.
Yeah, that is also fair. All right, well, that is a show, gentlemen. So chatted about a good range of stuff tonight. Thank you very much for hanging out with us, Jason. Appreciate you dialing in at such a late hour on your end of the country. So.
No, thank you so much for having me. It was a delight.
Yeah, awesome. So if people want to actually catch up on what you're up to on Game Hugs or what's going on with Machine QA and all that sort of stuff, where is the best place to find you?
The best place to find all of that is my Twitter account, which is at Jason Imms. You can find Game Hugs at gamehugs.com. You can find The Machine at themachine-qa.com. That website is due for an update, so don't judge me on the copy. But if you want to get in touch, then that's a great way of doing it.
Nice. And anything coming up that you want to spruik while you're on here? What's the next interview up on the list, or are you still working that out? I don't want to put you on the spot if you're planning that.
No, that's okay. I think the next one will be Pavel from 11-bit games, if we can make that work in the not too distant future. Otherwise, I reckon John Kane from Gritfish will be an addition soon, because I'd love to chat to him about his work-life balance and how he manages making games as well as having a day job.
Yep, very cool. Something that not all of us do as well as some of the crazy people out there in the industry, that's for sure. All right. Well, Christian, thanks for hanging out, man. It's been real.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Same time next week? What do you reckon?
Same time next week.
All right, cool. It's a deal. So thanks, everybody, for listening. You can catch us at all of the usual places. So mail at partyloaded.com, on Facebook at partyloaded, Twitter at partyloadedshow. All of our content is on YouTube at youtube.com/channelendgame, and you'll catch us sporadically on the Twitch at twitch.tv/partyloaded. Thanks again for hanging out. Hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be back again with more fun stuff to dwell on and pour over next week. But that's it for tonight. Thanks for listening, and good night.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.